Good afternoon, people. Thank you very much for joining today. My name is Angelica Bufa, a Salesforce developer working for Modelit, a consulting company located in Uruguay. Today, I will talk to you about how to set up a continuous integration process with Salesforce DX and Bitbucket pipelines. Before we start, I am sure that you've seen this before. If you are going to purchase Salesforce, please ensure that you are basing your decision on currently available products and services that Salesforce offers. The agenda for today will start with an introduction about what pipelines is and the items that you have to consider in order to take a decision if it's a good solution for you or not. I will also tell you about the experience and the reasons why we decide to adopt pipelines in the first place. After that, I will walk you through the steps you have to perform in order to set up in order to be able to set up the continuous integration process, and I walk you through the process of setting up the continuous integration. I will show you a basic demo that will give you an idea of the possibilities that you can achieve by using pipelines with DX. And finally, but not least important, I will answer any questions that you may have. So, how many of you have used pipelines or Bitbucket before? Really good number. So for those who haven't used, let me tell you that Pipeline is an integrated continuous integration service that is part of the Bitbucket platform, and it offers some features like unified experience. That means that you do not have to switch between platforms in order to get access to your repo and then have access to your continuous integration platform. Apart from that, all the magic, all the build configurations happens at just one place, one file called Bitbucket pipelines that is part of your repo. That means configuration as code. Pipelines are very easy to set up. I will walk you through that process. It's just 2 clicks. And also, it's very easy to integrate with other technologies, like I will show you what I did to integrate it with the Salesforce command line. Apart from that, you can use any branching model that you may use. So, this sounds very appealing, but you have to review some items to ensure that pipelines could be a good fit for you. The first thing that you have to review are the pipeline limitations, because, for instance, if you want to run processes that will take more than 2 hours, that will need more than 4 gigabytes of RAM memory, pipelines is not for you, because those are 2 of their main limitations. Another thing you have to take into account is how many builds you want to execute and how much time they will take, because the billing plans that Bitbucket offers are based on minutes. And then you have to think about the integrations you want to do, the report strategies you want to use, because pipelines do not offer out-of-the-box integrations like some other continuous integration platform has, like, let's say, Jenkins or Travis. So, my experience, we decided to adopt Bitbucket a year and a half ago, and at that time we were using Jenkins. We have the server in our own Amazon instance, and it was becoming very expensive and very hard to manage because we needed a dedicated resource for that. So when we switched to Bitbucket, we found out about pipelines, and the fact that everything was together into Bitbucket, we didn't have to switch between platforms. It was cheaper. This made us decide to adopt pipelines. Also, we were able to find a workaround for any limitation by using custom scripting, and the fact that they ran on Docker containers guarantee that anytime we ran the continuous integration, it will work just fine. So those were basically our reasons. Another good or important item is that the setup that you have to use is not that complex. We are using Visual Studio Code, plus Git, plus Bitbucket, and Docker, and I will tell you why Docker just in a couple of slides, and of course Salesforce. At this time, we are adopting DX, so we decided to start using the Salesforce command line because that's the way to go if you adopt DX, and also certain activities like deploying code takes less time than if you use the migration tool. But this configuration would work either if you are already working with a command line or if you are working with the metadata API. So what you need to do to start working. Basically, there are two steps. The first one happens in Bitbucket. Basically, you have to turn on pipelines. That's very easy to do. You just have to log into your Bitbucket account, go to your repo, settings, and just turn on the pipelines button. And by doing that, you're going to see that that blue button turns enable, and that means that you have to initialize your Bitbucket pipelines file. Keep in mind that turning on pipelines is a setting that you have to do for every repo where you want to run pipelines. It's not an account-based setting. So once you do that, once you initialize the pipeline file, you are going to get this screen that you're seeing here. And I want to talk a little bit about this file because it's very important. Here is where you define your build configurations. All the magic happens here. A few things about this file. It has to be part of your repo. It has to be located in the root of your repo. You can write it with any programming language that runs on Linux. All my examples are going to be used with shell scripting, but you can use PHP, Java, even Go. Another thing is about the format. Be very careful when using spaces, okay? Do not use tab character because you may break things. Remember, you can edit this in line from Bitbucket, or you can just edit it as you would edit any other file that is part of your repo, because again, this file is part of your repo, so you can just manage it as any other file. And then, that's all you have to do in Salesforce. Sorry, in Bitbucket. And now in Salesforce, what you have to do is to create a connected app. This connected app, it's like any other connected app you've used before. The only difference is that you need to associate a certificate to it. I'm not going to get into the details about how you set up the connected app, because Salesforce has done a good job. I documented it, and I have put in the reference section some links to the resource where you can have all the details. And if you have any questions, we're going to talk after the session. So once you're done with this, you are ready to start working on the pipelines definition. But before we do that, I would like to tell you about how pipelines work. So you have to understand that pipelines will be run anytime you commit a change to your repo. So the first thing is you do some changes and then you push them. When you push a commit to a branch that has pipelines enabled, Bitbucket will execute that pipeline in a Docker container. Have you ever used Docker before? Few hands, okay. Docker is an open platform that helps you with the process of writing, running, and deploying applications based on containers. And in order to explain you what a container is, I have to explain you what a Docker container image is. An image is a lightweight, standalone package of software that contains everything you need to run your application. And by everything, I mean your source code, dependencies, libraries, settings that you need. And which is the advantage of using containers? Containers let developers to package your application as a single unit, and anytime you run that application on that container, you guarantee that regardless of the machine you're using, the configuration you have on that machine, the application will run just fine. And what is the thing between image and containers? At runtime, an image becomes a container. So again, you push your changes, the pipeline is run on Docker, and at the end of that process, you may end up deploying your code to Salesforce, or, for instance, testing changes, or doing whatever you want, because you have all the possibilities. And having said that, that's how pipelines work. Let's talk about the Bitbucket pipelines file. Again, this is the most important file. This is the only thing you have to configure in order to make your pipelines work. So let me walk you through each section of the file. The first one that you see there, it's the image. what happens? Bitbucket comes with a default Docker image, but that image doesn't have the Salesforce command line installed. And our idea is to interact with Salesforce using the Salesforce command line. So what do? Two things. You Google for an existing Docker image that already has the command line installed, or you create your own image. I am not a Docker developer, but I was able to create an image and publish in just my first attempt, just following the tutorials, the basic tutorial for Docker, which is also in the reference section. And then the next thing you have, it's the pipelines. Pipelines let you know that your build configuration starts. And the next thing that we have on the file, it's how or when you want to run your pipelines. For instance, if you are making changes to a branch that is part of a repo that has pipelines enabled, but is not listed in any other section of this file, the default pipeline will be executed. If, for instance, you are making changes to a branch who is listed in the branch section, that's the pipeline that you're going to execute. And you also have two other options which are not very common, custom and tag. Custom, it's for manual execution of pipelines, and tag is to commit changes to branches that have the tags listed in that section. So moving forward, each pipeline contains the step section. The step identifies a build unit, and inside that build unit, you're going to see the script where it is, and that is the part where you list the commands that you will be executing. So let's take a deeper look at that. This pipeline will be executed anytime you make changes to a feature branch. And in fact, to any branch whose name starts with feature. And highlighted in green, you see the commands that I am going to be using. The first three are just going to output some information to the log console, and the last two are the Salesforce command lines commands that I will be executing to first authenticate to Salesforce, and second make a validation deploy to a given Salesforce organization. And about that, of course, like any command, you have to provide some information to make it work, some arguments. And how can you do that? Basically, you have three possible options. The first one, just hard-coded, which is not ideal depending on what you are using, because if it's a value that it will change, you will have to recommit the file with every time you change that value. You can see an example of hard-coded value in the alias that I am using reinforce. Or the other option that you have is to use variables that are part of the Bitbucket platform, and you can invoke them from this script by using $sign and the name of the variable that you just created. And if you wonder how can I create that, you just go into Bitbucket, into this section, and you can enter the name of your variable and the value. And you have two types, secure and non-secure. The secure type will mask the value, the store there, so anybody that accesses this page is not going to be able to see the value. That's the recommended approach when you are going live. But when you are just starting, you can use the non-secure, because it's very common that you run into issues, and it's because you were entering the wrong password or the wrong client ID. Sorry. So coming back one more step, you can also reference files like the key server, because that's something that we need to authenticate with the command line using the JSON Web Token. And before you ask, is it secure to store the key or the client ID in Bitbucket? I am assuming that you are working with a private repo and that you're giving access to the right people, so the answer is yes. So this is it. This is all you have to do. Assign the image, define the pipeline, the execution, and then list the commands that you want to execute. It's like just transcripting any commands that you would enter in your local machine in your terminal. So now it's time for a demo. Sorry, it's not going to be a live demo. Sorry about that. But here what I am going to show you is I made some changes to a test class. I just put some comments in there, and then I'm going to push that change to a repo that, of course, has pipelines enabled. Oh, it's not working. Okay, here it goes. Again, I am pushing some changes to that branch, and what will happen is Bitbucket will realize that I am committing. Remember, the commit is the triggering condition to run the pipeline. It's going to build the image that I specify in my Docker file, and after it builds, it will run the commands that I specify in the branch pipeline for my feature branch. And once that happens, if you go to Bitbucket, we are going to see a new entry right there. The status is going to be pending. And once the Docker image is built, the status is going to be changed to in progress. And as soon as the commands are executed, you are going to see an entry in the output console. For instance, I am going to be printing the host that I'm using to authenticate into Salesforce and the information about the user. And the most important information, maybe it's the one that you get from the deploy method, because you're going to see all of these methods you ran and if they were successful or not. Possible statuses for your pipeline is pending when you just queue it, in progress when it is executing, success if everything worked fine, error if there were errors, of course. And here, what I am doing is I am getting into Salesforce, into the deployment status, to show you that the pipeline just did its magic and it just creating a validation deployment that was successful. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Pretty easy and with a lot of opportunities to just achieve whatever you need. So now, some tips and tricks about pipelines. For instance, it's very common that you run into issues when, and things stop working. So please keep in mind that the file has to be in the root of your repo. Also, check about the format, ensure that the space you're using are correct. Also, check about the name of the file. It has to be pipelines, bitbucket-pipelines.yaml. It's very important. Also, please always use secure variables. Do not log sensitive information, because even if you are using the secure type, the pipeline is not going to prevent you from using an echo, for instance, and printing the information you store in that variable. About your Docker images, I told you that you have two options. You can go and search in Google to find an existing image, but that's not a really good idea, because eventually the owner of that image may just return the image, and that is going to cause some trouble for you, because the image is not going to be available for you to use in your pipeline. So create your own images and consume them. Also, keep in mind that it's very important for you to use custom scripts to achieve any customization that at first instance seems to be very complex to achieve. Don't be afraid. Use custom scripts and you're going to achieve whatever you want. And the last thing is, if you're making changes to your repo, like deleting a branch that used to have a pipeline associated, or adding a new branch that you want to be part of your pipeline's execution, just keep in mind that you have to update the pipeline's file accordingly. Okay? Because the platform is not going to make it for you. And with that, we've finished the presentation. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay? Thank you very much. Just one more thing. Tomorrow is the developer keynote. You are more than welcome to join us to find out what is the next things for developers. Again, thank you very much for joining me today, and have a great Dreamforce.